Hey, before you watch this thing, hit subscribe, would you? What other unpopular opinions or things that you didn't know or things you've changed your mind about?
Maybe God.
Go. I'm interested because I have also.
So I grew up Catholic. I was altar boy just like you.
Mm-hmm.
I had a very firm, in my mind, understanding that not only did a God exist, but a kind of an idea that he existed within the framework of the religion that I was inside
Old
of.
man.
Yeah. Whatever those
beard.
are.
Yep. Clouds.
And even Catholicism, it's kind of convoluted. There's
It's
three of them.
the worst story ever told.
There's three persons, but it's like one
I was
thing.
at church I went to church with my mom, and it was like, this is the most convoluted storytelling
it is.
I've ever fucking heard.
No,
the fact
it
that
makes
they
no
call it the
sense.
greatest story ever told, it's like, guys, this isn't even in the top 1,000.
Yeah. And the fact that modern Christianity is really built on cannibalism, I mean, every week it's like the body of Christ going into your mouth.
Incredibly bizarre,
and it's not, by the way, it's not symbolic of his body.
No.
It's not a symbolism.
It's been transmuted
exactly.
to not, there is no metaphor.
Actually, the idea is you are actually eating the actual body of Christ. So it really is, it's not even a joke. It actually is cannibalism.
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's pretty crazy.
It's one of the many things it's bananas about.
Transubstantiation. That's
there
the
you
name.
go.
Yeah.
Another very convoluted term that's unnecessary. They didn't need to.
Mm-hmm.
Did you? So what? Was your. So then you fell out.
I would call it agnostic for a while. I was kind of searching. I went to a Protestant church for a while. I had when I was doing stand up, I had a manager. She was very that Christian where they want to sign people up type of stuff. So I went to her church for a while. Really nice people and stuff, but it wasn't quite for me. And so I stopped going. And then when I met my wife, she was very Catholic. She comes from a very Catholic family. And so I started going again. And I thought, once we had kids, I thought, well, it's good for me to go because it's good to give the kids something, and then they can make up their own minds.
Do you still believe that they need a moral framework from a religious organization?
I think there's value in it. Yes.
Okay.
I think it's
more value than not.
Yes,
okay.
Correct.
Fine, because I wonder.
Well, then good luck choosing where they get their moral framework,
Well, I've spoken to people that didn't grow up religious, and they were like, yeah, you just get a moral framework from like your parents and the world.
Good luck having the right parents.
Okay, fair. Fair enough, yeah.
Right, but you don't have to necessarily count on the right parents if there's a framework that enough people agree on. Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So... And you may have to get lucky with that. Who knows? It may be a horrible religion that gives you a bad framework. I don't know. But I think at the right time, they can make up their own mind about things just like I did, because I'm not going to pressure them with it or that sort of thing. But, when they're young, they can grow up in it. So I went to church faithfully during all that time. And then once they were older and stuff, I stopped going so much. And then something happened to me. This was the moment that happened because I'll never forget it, where I remember having discussions with people about it and arguing back and forth and all that kind of stuff, and still feeling that I was kind of agnostic. And I had Neal deGrasse Tyson was on my podcast, and I was asking him questions about everything. And I'm kind of a contrarian sometimes.
This is fairly recently then.
No, this was back in 2016.
That's not.
Yeah,
fair. Like it's not.
2018. 2018.
So that's
Yeah, fairly recently.
Yeah.
And I asked him that question I said, what is life? Like, what happens when you die? Because I've always been obsessed with death a little bit too. And he broke it down in such a granular, molecular way that it just fucked with me. And I was like, fuck, you're right. I mean, that's really what happens. You are absolutely right. That's what I didn't keep saying that. But I remember it fucking with me for days. And I'll just never forget that feeling. And then I just started thinking of God differently.
What's the short version of what he said?
Well, he just explained life on a very molecular level, like matter, just deteriorates and, turns into this and that, and the molecules do this. He just said it very coldly of what actually happens, and, you're trained to think spiritually and that type of stuff, and then the soul, all that stuff. Yeah. And then when I thought of it like that, I was like, wow, it just really hit me in a way where it's not like that was new information. I think it just hit me at that time in a way that I wasn't counting on.
And it made you believe in God more?
No. I wouldn't say I became an atheist, but I kind of...
Your agnosticism got stronger?
Yes. That's what I would say. I always said I'll take Pascal's wager, you know, and that sort of thing. But because even if you're an atheist, you're believing in something. You're sure about something.
Yeah.
You're sure. In that case, you're sure about the non-existence.
Yeah.
So I'm more agnostic. I don't know.
Yeah.
Shows up, good on you.
Yeah.
But right now, probably not going to happen.
All right. Well, the question because I went kind of the opposite way, where I was agnostic atheist, and then I took ayahuasca and sort of experienced the God, right? And I haven't been able to shake it in a good way.
Okay, say that again.
I experienced a God or a central creation force or a interconnectedness that I have in a drug experience, ayahuasca and DMT and MDMA, and I have not, and mushrooms, and I have not, it has not faded.
Oh, how long ago was that?
The first one was 4 years ago.
Oh, so very recent.
Yeah.
So why do you equate that feeling? Why does that equal to a God thing, as opposed to just
the feeling it was a feeling of a God. It was a feeling of a central creation force.
What is a God feeling?
Something turned this on, and I felt connected to it. To the spirit
wasn't yourself.
Yes.
That was something, some force there that was in.
Yeah.
It's interesting,
Yeah, and again, I couldn't sell anybody on it because it's something I experienced.
Yeah.
So, and I don't need you to not eat meat, or I don't need any.
Well, that's a religious thing. Does it make you feel more spiritual?
It makes me entire. It's the only. I had this experience, and then I watched an interview with Sting. He did ayahuasca, and he said,
"This is the only genuine religious experience I've ever had."
Yeah.
It was like I hadn't had one. He grew up some kind of, I think, Christian.
I brought up Catholic.
And then it was basically like, this is what they said church was. I actually experienced it.
Right.
And I've heard people say, like, the body of Christ is ayahuasca. Like, it's based in that and tribal and da-da-da-da. It's got 10 different precursors.
Right.
Whatever. But Christianity or Catholicism. But the only spiritual experience I've ever had, and it's been continuous, and it makes it change my life. But it's not, I don't proselytize. I don't. It's just like it changed my experience.
Right.
But I don't.
And it doesn't translate to a religion there's no personification of it.
No, it's not organized. It's not, I don't need
it's
to.
It's a thing.
It's an experience and a thing I think I feel.
Sure.
So
I get it. So part of what I remember reading the book Sapiens, which was another big influence on some of my thinking on this. One of the things that was real fascinating about that book was the idea of what a myth is, and how
the best one being money.
Yes,
in that book,
it's fantastic.
Money being like, no, it's just a thing we all agree to,
yes,
but it's not.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah,
the fact that we're all agreeing to something, and the power of that, and it's why you can have groups and larger groups, right? With myths. But when I was thinking about religion, and what I felt is one of the true reasons for having a God, let's say, because religion goes back so far. In fact, one of the first things was the sun. People just worship the sun just because it created life, you know, which they're not wrong. You know, that's true.
Take nothing away from the sun.
Right. But when outside of pure idolatry of something that's doing something and you're thinking it, which is one type of religious activity, which I think was the first type.
Yeah.
The advancement of that is that I am not just a corporal being, that I have a place after this, right? That's an advancement in religion. The Egyptians are the most famous for that first, which is why they built the mummy, all that stuff, right?
The idea of an after party.
Yes, exactly. Now, to me, so I feel that primarily has been invented because humans are one of the, I'll say rare animals, because I don't know if other animals can do this, but we can actually reflect. We can do more than think. We can actually reflect. We haven't seen that other animals can do that. Maybe dolphins can, It looks like dogs can, right? But, we don't just act by instinct, we have a lot of time on our hands. You
Yeah.
know? Even so, our brains have developed to that part. And one of the most dire reflections is death.
Yes.
Okay, so animals act out of instinct because they're trying to avoid death. Their body knows how dire death is,
Yeah.
and they try to avoid it at all costs by eating, by killing, by all these things. You know, but we can actually ruminate on the darkness of what death really is, and how much despair. There's so much despair in the idea of not being here at all.
Yeah. Not
You know,
existing. Yeah.
That you almost have to create a way out of that.
You'd be a
You know?
fool not to.
Why would you not? Exactly. So that makes complete sense to me, that an afterlife would be created to deal with the despair of thinking, not only are you not going to be here, you've only been here since you came out of that womb.
Yeah.
Like there's this short amount of time.
Yeah, it
when
makes
you are
total
a conscious
sense.
being and you're just gone. You're just wiped out.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's like the death row conversion. It's like, wow, so
Yeah.
you're going to die in an hour and you just realize you're going to die.
It's done.
So so now
Right.
you're interested. I find myself where I'm like, Neal, well, I am getting older. Maybe maybe it's just pure self-interest, or people that stop getting hired in showbiz and go like, showbiz is stupid and shallow.
Right.
That's the thing is I'm entirely comfortable admitting that may be it.
Yeah.
And I don't really. The all I can say for myself is it's not cool, like believing in something. Like there's not, and no one thinks I'm cooler because of it. Like there's
That's
not
funny.
there is the self interest of like, I'm not, when I die, I don't die.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't. There's no way for me to. There's no code of behavior that I need to follow in order to get there or any of that. Because that's the other thing where you go like, oh, this is man-made.
Yeah, and I'm not the spiritual cop, nor do I have spiritual envy. Like I don't have food envy. Like somebody's eating something, I care less. Eat what you want, you know. But some people are like, you're gonna eat that? Oh, you eat meat, or this is why you got to be a cop? Who the fuck gave you permission for that?
Yep.
So it doesn't threaten me if somebody believes in something, nor do I feel like I have to convince somebody of something.
Yeah.
For me, it's just kind of an observation that I have. But I still leave room open to be wrong, like I do with everything, you know?
Yeah.
But I find it fascinating that, and now, so I have a different relationship with the afterlife than I had before, I guess is the short thing. So before, I was certain there was an afterlife, certain.
Even as an agnostic, or?
I felt there was a good possibility. Like I felt, if anything could explain the phenomena of ghost, you know,
right? Which, okay, so you do believe in ghosts.
Some of that is like, you know, is ridiculous, but there's some things that might have some meaning to it of maybe, you know, seeing something or something maybe.
Have you had any experiences?
I've had different things that are unexplainable. I can't remember if there have been any visionary things, but I've had unexplainable events for sure. But so that's why I say I have room for those types of things or whatever. You know, even the whole idea of the communion of consciousness, I guess you could say, or whatever, you know, where there's a certain consciousness. It's not just culture, which has been passed down, but kind of a consciousness which has been passed down. I mean, that was a theory where, you know, people feel they can tap into that or something like that.
Or people inventing things at the same
I call
period.
that clustering. I firmly believe in that. Clustering is amazing.
People that couldn't possibly, that weren't connected.
Amazing.
Before the world was connected, people inventing things.
Amazing. Look at
you know what happens in comedy too.
Absolutely.
Where somebody will think of a bit and then I thought of a bit.
Yep.
I tweeted it and then somebody had tweeted it the day before. Someone I didn't follow. Somebody, and it was just like, they accused me of stealing, and it was like,
look at the Renaissance. The Renaissance had all those great painters at that same time in that part of the world, you know, and you know, in music and all that kind of stuff. So it happens in science, it happens in art. I've always called that clustering, you know, where there's a shared kind of consciousness that happens. Like if the Wright brothers had not invented flight, I mean, in France they were doing the same thing. There were a couple of guys in France doing the same thing, so it would have happened around the same time. Maybe would that be part of the, maybe there's something to a god or a spirit world? Maybe something more of a spirit or like energy thing that you're talking about, you know, because there are a lot of physical laws that we are not aware of yet.
I know.
You know?
Yeah. Most we're not aware of.
So let's say if we think about our thoughts, really are a collection of electrical impulses that are in a vehicle that has the ability to store those electrical impulses and allows us to continue talking and remember things and all that kind of stuff too. Well, if they are electrical, we know that, we've seen the way impulses can travel through the air and be connected to things, because we've seen that. We've invented radio, we've invented telegraph, all that kind of stuff. So maybe there is a way that things are connected in ways that we can't see, that are on, I don't know, different physical level that we don't know. Like, I insist that everything's connected just because everything has molecules in it and atoms, right? So when you think about it, like, I'm really touching you right now because everything's connected,
Well, that's what I was going to ask is do you believe that science is deciphering God?
No.
Okay.
I don't believe that right now, but I've heard arguments for that, and I have no problem with that argument. I feel that what science does for us is a way to, understand the universe and understand how systems work. But for me, I don't think it's deciphering God. No.
Okay.
If something was going to decipher God, I think that would be the role of religion.
I actually totally
it's got a scientist.
I totally disagree with that. That part I completely, because I don't think religion to me is a way of honoring God. I think it's all silly, but it's as if God needs whatever. Like, God's very insecure and you need to speak well of it. It's like silly.
Or people make God their butler, saying,
exactly.
Jesus,
would you
take
mind?
the wheel, just like you take the wheel.
I invented the car, you
Yes,
fucking
exactly.
asshole. So I don't find religion to be it's almost completely not related to God to me in a way. But my question
I think
is,
science is the opposite, to be honest with you. But some people disagree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I know what they mean, but I'm inclined to think that it's deciphering. Nature is God, and it's deciphering. Whatever.
Sure.
Did your life get better as a result, or worse, or push?
But saying nature is God is making a different statement than having God as a separate entity than nature, because you either believe God invented nature, which means God is not nature. God actually created nature. But if you say nature is God, you don't really need God because you already have nature.
It's all one thing.
Right. But you don't need God if you already have nature, if it's one thing. If there's no distinction, why do you need God for? You already have nature. Like, I always say that with people with the distinction. They say, it's hot in here. I think it's humid. Well, it's pick your lane here. Which one?
I don't think.
It's cold.
I think it's all one thing.
Yeah. It's red. Yeah.
Like, you're God, I'm God. That's God. It's all God. If that, it's whatever.
Right.
It's beyond esoteric. But so did your life get better or worse, or push from going from agnostic or deep?
No, there was no. I have a set of values that I live by that guide my life more so than what I believe in is true out in the universe.
How much of it's informed by Catholicism, do you think?
Oh, a lot.
And are you okay with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because there is something to be said for, like, it is obviously parts of it are so useless and just like,
you can make fun of the Ten Commandments, but there's a lot of good things.
Yeah,
in the Ten
exactly.
Commandments.
Like, 8 of them are,
and both of those are true. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely material for jokes. Absolutely.
Sure.
And at the same time, there's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
Really good stuff that Jesus said, and there's a lot of stuff that's ripe for jokes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Both of those things are true.
Okay, so that's very interesting that you've gotten less faith-based or whatever.
Well, I don't know if faith-based
or
the actual belief in that being, isn't necessary for me,
Yeah.
Right.
Does that not contradict your moral framework for children?
No, because those are rules that are religious based, Now, if your only reasoning for doing that is to please God, then that's the connection that you have. And so once you get rid of that, you say, well, I don't have to please God anymore. If that's how you're viewing it, then fine. But if you have a framework for living that is a solid framework, well, why would I abandon that,
Yeah, and you are, it is not based on pleasing God. It's just like,
correct.
I don't know, it's just not being an asshole.
Well, also, the way that Catholicism was always different for me from Protestantism is like, I always felt like Protestantism, you were going to get something from God. It's that same type of thing, sitting in the pews. I hope the preacher has a good message for me today, But Catholicism is all about service. it's so service oriented, and that's one of the things I've always liked about it. In fact, a lot of the activities of the church around the world are based in service.
Have you ever,
like, you're taking the attention off of yourself?
Sure. Have you ever abandoned yourself in a way that you regret in service of others?
I wouldn't say in service of others, but it's part of that period I was talking about where I had forsook myself for so long in terms of what my real emotional needs were and expression and all that stuff. And the learning of that was a huge, big deal for me. So it wasn't explicit as doing it in that way.
Did you find that?
But I've never done it in a practical way like that where, in the way that I think that you're asking.
Well, no, I've just done it. Mm-hmm. I think women probably do it more than men, but But the service, all service all the time. Yeah. And then you end up kind of fucking yourself and you abandon yourself and you end up.
Or you build resentment.
Yeah. Or just or martyr yourself or whatever.